ZingoTV, channel 251. Please remember to download the both Barn Burner and ZingoTV apps in their respective app stores, both available on iOS and on Android devices. While you're there, feel free to rate our show, leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. And remember, both apps are free. ZingoTV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire and TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Let's get right into today's show. Today's guest is joining us from Toronto, Ontario, Joel Hannon. Joel, thank you so much for being on the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well. I'm excited to be on the show.
Well, we are so excited to have you and chat about your career. It's honestly one of the most interesting careers I've ever had the opportunity to kind of delve into and talk about. So I'm really excited to share your story with everybody. But I want to start and jump in right away. One common thread I found is that when people have excelled in the sport of volleyball, they were actually multi-sport athletes, and you are no exception to what I found is this new rule. You were a very high-level hockey player in high school. So can you tell us a little bit about the outset of your kind of athletic career and starting out in hockey?
Yeah, hockey was a huge part of my life growing up. I played rep hockey and played double A through high school. So, I mean, I knew I was never going to play in the NHL, but when you're growing up in Toronto and hockey is a big part of your life, it is every part of your life. It's such a big part of the culture for young boys and girls in Toronto, with it kind of being the world's mecca and hub for hockey. And yeah, played just about every sport I could growing up. Hockey was certainly, from a competitive standpoint, the biggest part of my life, but I skateboarded a ton. I played a lot of lacrosse and basketball and a little bit of volleyball as well. Like I played it for a couple of years in high school, but I was as much a volleyball player in high school as I was like a skateboarder. It was not a big part of my life. It was just another activity in sport I did when I had the time. So yeah, definitely played a lot of different sports growing up and didn't commit to volleyball until I was actually outside of high school, which is abnormal for sure.
So I want to just touch a little bit more on your hockey career. So coming from the West, hockey isn't as big of a deal. And you just said Toronto is kind of the mecca of Canadian hockey. It's the hub. So, there just seems to be this emphasis, this one-track mind of making it to the NHL, making it to the OHL, just making it to that next level of competition. How do you think this kind of mindset of this one-track mind of only focusing on that in that sport had an effect on your view of excellence and competition growing up?
It's a good question. It puts you in a little bit of a box. I think sports is obviously a good thing for kids to have growing up. It keeps you active. It is a huge part of your social life. I mean, most of my friends growing up were good friends that I met through sports. And it teaches you good habits and all those qualities. I think you hear them so much when you're a young kid from your parents about how sports make you into a better person, and you don't really appreciate that or understand that until you get older, into university, and you start working in collaborative environments, and you see how being a part of a team actually does pay off, which is kind of cool. But it does put you into a box when the culture of sports tells you that you have to pick one very early on, and that's a big part of your identity. That's a big part of, in extreme cases, like your value. How good you're playing in sports kind of determines how good you feel about yourself. And I think I've read a few good books in my life that kind of challenge that and talk more about a generalist approach to life that I've kind of come to believe. And I really think that the fact that I switched focuses into volleyball at a later point in life helped me a lot. And actually, my coach at Ryerson, Nico Rukavina, had a similar path, and he and I have talked a lot. We talked a lot while I was playing at Ryerson about he didn't choose volleyball until the very end of high school, and then he went on to play professional volleyball for 2 years after a very successful career at Queen's University, where he won a couple OUA championships, and he had a lot more like tangible success in the sport by this point than I have. But we talked a lot about the value of coming from different sports. It gives you a special confidence too when you don't tie yourself so much to one thing in life. It, especially for young kids, it lets them see themselves in a more honest way, because it's very distorting when you think that other people are judging you just by how you played in one sport. So I think it helped me personally in my sports journey, and also through life. I was able to play volleyball at a high. I still am able to play volleyball at a really high level, and know that it's not who I am, because I lived 18 years of my life before I played volleyball. I really like 20 years of my life before volleyball was a competitive part of my life. So
yeah,
it's a very small window right now, and it helps me not get too caught up in it.
So do you think that, that kind of culture of that in any sport of, focusing on that one thing, one aspect or of your life leads to more frequent burnout in young athletes? Would you say that is something that you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't wanted to play hockey since since high school, which is pretty crazy because my brother played professionally, and all of my friends growing up played hockey, and it's a huge part of Canadian culture and still is a huge part of my family, and my nephews play. But I have maybe played shinny 4 times since high school, just pickup hockey. I haven't put on full equipment since I was 17. I mean, I went to school, I did my undergraduate degree in Ottawa, and I like never even wanted to go skating on the canal. That was more because of how cold it was. The novelty wears off pretty quickly when it's minus 30 degrees outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it totally does. You, aside from what I've already said about tying your value to it, you just do it so much. And when you're young, I think you also have this warped sense of time about how much time you put into something. Like when you're 15 years old and you're in a relationship with someone and it lasts like 3 months, you're like, this is the most serious relationship ever, because you haven't lived very long to have perspective. So if you play a sport competitively for like 6 or 7 years, that's half your lifetime maybe at that point. And so you genuinely feel that you've done it and you're over it, and you've had so many people putting pressure on you to get better at it, and you have had so many people, like, that's the only thing people ask you about is, oh, how's hockey going, how's soccer going, whatever your sport is. And a book I read by a journalist that I really like called David Epstein, he wrote a book that talked literally about this, about it when kids specialize in a sport early on versus if they specialize later on and play lots of different sports. They burn, if you pick the one sport too early, you burn out faster. But even if you don't burn out, your ceiling of excellence is actually lower than the people who chose to not specialize and delay their specialization. Obviously, that's with huge amounts of data, and it's such a broad statement to apply to everyone, because I know lots of people that picked one sport early on, excelled at it, and still love it. Yeah. But I know my story and what I feel, and I think to put a lot of pressure on a kid at a young age to choose anything too early is not a good recipe, whether it's sports or school or career choices. I think putting too much pressure on kids, you stifle them a little bit.
Totally. And I really appreciate you like sharing that. And because I feel like that's something, especially today, where we're just focusing on, or a lot of parents, especially now stepping into like a little bit of a coaching role. It's like, this is what I want them to do. They're going to be the best on it. And to be the best, you have to start as early as possible. And I totally agree with you that that's not the case. But I want to fast forward a little bit. So you essentially were heading into the university. You were going to Carleton, and you weren't planning on playing any sports, as you said. Like, you didn't even want to go skate on the canal. So obviously it doesn't sound like you necessarily struggled with not playing, but did you feel at all like there was something missing, like you needed a little bit of an outlet at all?
Yeah, I miss being competitive. That's mutually exclusive from the sport I'm playing in. Whether I'm playing cribbage with my girlfriend or I'm playing volleyball, I'm competitive, and I like to play against someone in something. So I was in university and I wasn't playing hockey. I was going to Carleton in Ottawa, like you said, and I missed being competitive. And I was playing intramural basketball, I was playing intramural volleyball, and the summer after first year of university, I went and lived in Vancouver with my sister. And my parents had just moved there actually from Toronto, where I grew up, because they had no more kids in the house. So they downsized back to BC, where they're from. And I kind of just decided that I was going to play beach volleyball. I knew that it was a thing in Vancouver. I knew that Kits Beach had this awesome culture. And I asked my brother and my sister, I was like, do you guys know anyone who plays beach volleyball in Vancouver that could that I could meet? And they knew a guy who's very well connected in the community. His name's Sean Sanderson. He owns a coaching business called Side Hope Beach. And I was like 18. I Facebook messaged him. I was like, hey, like, I'm into volleyball. I play like rec volleyball in Ottawa where I go to school. I'm like trying to play beach. Can you bring me down? He's like, yeah, man, like come on down. And I played with a bunch of him and a bunch of old farts, and just got to know people and would just go down to the beach and play, and just got hooked, and caught the bug
Well,
for beach volleyball.
Well, you clearly caught the bug for beach volleyball because this summer for you, when we were doing our pre-interview and you were telling me the story, it was really crazy. You were enrolling in tournaments and you worked at a bar and you would work till 4 a.m., have a 7 a.m. start on the beach, and you would do that almost every weekend. So clearly you had found your kind of niche sport. What do you think it was about the beach culture that resonated so much with you and your personality?
Yeah, it's such a beach rat story of like not sleeping and just playing beach all summer.
Classic story, yeah.
I think anyone who has ever been to Kits Beach wants to stay there. It is the coolest beach that I've ever been to, in the fact that you're like an 8-minute bike ride from downtown Vancouver. You're a 20-minute drive from the mountains. You can see West Van and all the mountains from the beach. And I was 18 and it was my first time living, like it was my first true bit of independence. Like when you're at university, I was on res, and like you have res pass and you do your classes and you're a student, but you're very much on campus and that's your life. But this was the first time I was in a city, and my parents, like I wasn't living with my parents, and I had like a basement suite where I was detached from my sister's house. And so I didn't have any adult supervision for a whole summer.
Yeah.
And I think I just got hooked on that sort of freedom. Beach volleyball is a sport of a lot of easy vibes and chill lifestyles, and it matched very well with me loving my little bit of freedom. And it was a way to be competitive. There's a lot of really great volleyball athletes that are from Vancouver, and UBC, Trinity Western, Simon Fraser University all have great volleyball programs. And so the quality of volleyball at Kits Beach is also really strong. And so I think for the next few summers, when I went back to Vancouver to spend my summer there and play beach,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to improve very quickly, despite being in a pretty casual environment still, just because everyone was good at volleyball. And so it's a great mix of good culture, good people, but really high level volleyball as well.
Yeah. One thing that I really love about the Kits Beach culture too is it's not just people who are between the ages of like 18 and 28. It's a lot of older veterans that really excel in the sport. And honestly, like are competing at Van Open and qualifying for bigger matches. So what do you think of, what did you learn in those moments from those veteran players that were in like their 40s and some in their 50s? And how did you take that and use some of their advice and put that and implement that into your career?
That's a really good question. The answer ties really well into what we've been talking about specializing later in life. The thing that I tell people a lot because I find myself in a never-ending debate about Vancouver versus Toronto.
Me too.
Ontario, yeah, you went to school in Ryerson, Ontario is a high performance province from a sports perspective.
Yeah.
It follows the model of grooming you from a young age, investing money into you and time and resources, and making you specialize early. And for that model, it pumps out a lot of really good athletes. A lot of really talented athletes in all sports come from Ontario, not just because it has the biggest population, but because of that high performance culture.
Mm-hmm.
BC is the exact opposite, I found in my experiences. So many of my friends from Vancouver go on hikes, mountain bike, skateboard, surf, play volleyball, do so many things at an older age. But what I love about the Kids Beach culture specifically is that there's this really cool permission to keep wanting to get better at an older age. And so when I was 18, I was playing with like 45-year-olds that were still like going to the beach one day and telling me in games like, hey, today I'm only working on cut shots.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, you have a family and you have a full-time job and you're coming down the beach and playing games, but you still want to get better at something. This conversation about early specialization at 18 years old was not something I was concerned about at all yet, or had ever like thought about. But it gave me a psychological permission that, okay, even though I'm 18 and I did feel like I was coming into the sport late at that point, I was totally allowed to want to pay one of the like pros at Kits to like coach me for an hour, or that I could go down and like want to do drills with people instead of just playing games. I was totally okay. And I thought that was really cool. And that gave me a confidence that I carried when I went to Ryerson as a 23-year-old on a pretty young indoor OUA team as well, that I didn't really care that I was so much older than everyone. Like I didn't really care that I was a 23-year-old rookie. Mm-hmm. I joked about it, obviously, because it's so obvious how much older I was than all the guys on my team. But I think if I didn't have that background from Kits Beach, where it's totally okay to still be trying to get better at a sport past your prime, then I would have been maybe a bit more insecure about going and playing indoor volleyball when I went to do my master's.
So, obviously like the culture stuck with you. You've now kind of caught the beach volleyball bug and you decide to fully commit to it. And a couple summers later, you meet your future partner, Ivan Reka. And so you begin training with him. His partner was injured. And he decided, so he knew that he was already going to make the national team. And you'd been playing with him and improving. And all of a sudden, you get an email that kind of, I would assume, kind of changed the course of your direction in the sport a little bit, but you got an email from the national team. Can you tell us about your response to that?
Yeah, I actually got a phone call from Ivan, mm-hmm. and he and I had met the summer before at Van Open. He flew out to play, and he and I practiced together a few days before Van Open, and then he stayed after Van Open for a few weeks just to explore BC. I think he had some family out there as well, so we got to know each other pretty well. Yeah. And he called me in November. So this is like, 4 months later. And he said, I hear you're moving to Toronto. I was in my last semester of my undergrad. I was finishing in December. And he's like, I hear you're moving to Toronto. I need a partner for the national team camp and to like train with in the winter. Is that something you'd want to do? And my response was, I kind of had one of those moments where it's like, this is like a pretty important phone call you're getting, because up until that point, I didn't see myself as a high performance beach athlete. I didn't see myself as someone who was going to commit a ton of time to this in the future. I was hoping to play beach when I moved back to Toronto, because I knew I was going to be there for a while. And yeah, he kind of changed the course for me a little bit. I went to the national team camp. I got cut, but I got really good feedback from the coaches, and I was partnered with.
Just so everybody
What's that?
He made it to the last round of cuts, just so everybody knows. Somebody who has never really been formally trained in beach. He made it to the last round of the next gen national team. So I just want to put that out there. Like, don't cut yourself short.
Yeah, no, I was really proud of myself. I was. It was nice to get that recognition from the national team coaches that I had a lot of potential to continue improving. And um, yeah, I was allowed to attend some practices during the winter a couple times a week. And Ivan and I competed, and we didn't end up sticking out the partnership for the full season because he got some opportunities to play with some really good athletes and make some money. And he had just moved from Montreal, so like he needed to pay his way. And I totally understood that. He and I are still really close friends. We played beach together a couple weeks ago. Um, and but yeah, it kind of changed the course. Practicing with the national team taught me how to play volleyball correctly. It taught me how to be a high performance athlete. It got me my connections that eventually got me a spot on the Ryerson men's team. So it was that phone call in November from Ivan was a big catalyst for me.
That's a great segue. You talked about, the national team kind of setting you up for your indoor university career. You were connected with Matt Harris, who was at the time the head coach of Ryerson's men's indoor team.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously you started your indoor career a little bit later than most. And as you mentioned, you were 23, and that year, the majority of the team was kind of 20 and under.
Yeah.
So aside from your goal being just to compete to the best of your ability and contribute on the court, what was your main objective going into the season as it pertains to your role on the team and how you saw yourself?
Good question. I had 2 seasons ahead of me when I got the opportunity to play on the men's volleyball team. I extended my master's program, which was typically a 1-year program, to a 2-year degree
Mhm.
because I knew that if I left after 1 year of playing varsity volleyball, I'd want more. Um, my goal my goals were to get as good at volleyball as I possibly could and enjoy it. And in hindsight, now that it's behind me, I know I did that. I got way better at volleyball than I thought I would. I I obviously had a large leadership role in the team, being so much older and not being able to contribute on the court in meaningful ways. Like I started for a large part of last season and then for a bit of this season, but I knew I was never going to be the star of the team. We had a lot of really great athletes and volleyball players in the team, and I knew my role was going to be more setting a good example, teaching people how to be good student athletes, how to be good students, how to take care of themselves, how to be high performance athletes, and all that stuff. Indoor was a huge change for me from the beach, and I still think my game lends itself better to the beach. But yeah, those are my goals. Just trying to get as good as I possibly could, make it count. So yeah.
So we only have a couple more minutes, but I just want to ask you one more question. So just looking back at your career, you mentioned in our pre-interview, it was kind of at the right place at the right time. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think as like you can attribute just your career to luck. What do you think separated you from the players in your first summer playing beach? Um, and like, what attributes do you think you had to going from just like a pickup player at Kids Beach that really enjoyed the game to being on a top indoor varsity team?
It's a good question. Maturity and confidence are a huge part of playing volleyball. It's an incredibly technical sport,
Yeah.
and the time that a ball is on your body is very small. And so I attributed a lot to golf. A lot of times that you either hit a good shot or you don't. You either pass a 4 or you don't, or you
Totally.
either hit it where you want it to go or you don't. And I mean, you as a defensive specialist, you get that contacts are so crucial.
Mhm.
Um, and with that, you have to have a very steady mindset. And I think being older made up for a lot of the reps that I missed and a lot of the motor patterns that I didn't learn because it's such a technical sport. I still don't have the best form and I still don't look like a true volleyball player. A lot of the times I look like an athlete who picked up volleyball a bit later, but I mean, so far it's been good enough. Um, yeah, I think the maturity and the confidence, and then having a good athletic background in general. I know where my feet are, I know where my hands are, and
Yeah.
those are very obvious things to say, but you can tell when there's bad athletes that are good at volleyball,
Yeah.
and there's great volleyball players that can't play a single other sport. or don't know their left hand from their right hand. And that's fine. It's totally fine what your background is. But yeah, I think having a good athletic background and then having the maturity and confidence helped me succeed and improve very quickly for the indoor game.
Well, Joel, that's the end of our show. We cannot thank you enough for making the time to make an appearance on here. So if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do so?
If people want to get a hold of me, they can follow me on Instagram at Joel K. Hannon. I post a lot of content about my cats. And yeah, if you want to talk sports or volleyball, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, my name. That might be private, actually. It's probably just Instagram, message me on Instagram if you want to talk volleyball or talk sports.
Awesome. And you can get a hold of me on Instagram or my Twitter. My handle is at @DMaragos. That's DEEMARAGOS. And remember, this show can also be heard on the Barn Burner Radio Network and the H.E.R Network, which is part of the Barn Burner Media Network. Check out barnburner.ca for all other news programming. Joel, once again, thank you so much. And you guys will see you right back here on the H.E.R Network next Monday at 7:30 p.m. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Dan.